Let's turn back to the death of Ian Bailey, the chief suspect for the 1996 murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier, who died suddenly in West Cork yesterday. In a moment, we'll speak to Frank Buttimer, Ian Bailey's solicitor. But first, Nick Foster, journalist, author of Murder at Roaring Water, joins us now. Nick, your reaction to news of Ian Bailey's death?
Well, yeah. Good morning. I heard the news in a cafe here in Brussels where I live, and I can tell you that my immediate thoughts were with Sophie and her family. They've suffered terribly over the last 27 years. Her poor parents have lived with this appalling crime for all that time, as has her son, and they've never had any justice despite all their efforts. So my thoughts this morning, as yesterday, were with them.
You have spoken to Ian Bailey?
I've spoken to him many times. I mean, as part of writing the book, I wanted to get as close as possible to him, and I got to know him pretty well over the years.
What was your... you wrote a book on this murder. What was your conclusion in that book?
Well, my conclusion was that he murdered Sophie, and I told him so.
What did he say when you said that to him?
Well, I wasn't able to confront him face to face. It was during the time of the pandemic, so I had to do it over the phone. But he simply put the phone down on me.
How can you be so certain? Because like a number of the Gardaí were not able to bring a prosecution. James Hamilton, the former DPP, reviewed the whole file. He found no grounds for a case. Another report basically debunked a lot of the claims made against Ian Bailey. He was never charged, never mind convicted of this crime.
Well, I'm not sure if the DPP found that there was no case at all against Ian Bailey. It's true that they didn't choose to put him on trial in Ireland, but the case against Ian Bailey, as I saw it in the Garda file, is extremely strong. Bailey clearly knew about the murder before he was officially informed. He told a neighbour about the murder, and even reassured that neighbour that this was somebody that she didn't know. He had scratches, not just on his arms and his hands, but also on his forehead.
Weren't a lot of those claims
after the murder,
debunked?
But he didn't have any before.
Weren't a lot of those claims debunked in the 2001 report for the DPP? Weren't a lot of those claims about scratches in the arms and so on, witness statements? Weren't a lot of those issues debunked subsequently?
Absolutely not. I mean, the file is as it is. I mean, the crying shame is not just that Ian Bailey wasn't put on trial in Ireland, but it's also that the huge amount of evidence against Mr. Bailey that's available in the Garda file simply hasn't been seen by the Irish people. That's the truth of it. And I think that the DPP, you talk about the 2001 report, the author of that report, I think, was incredibly naive in simply lapping up Bailey's excuses, simply accepting at face value, accepting at face value that Ian Bailey, who made confession, he was running around.
I'm sure the author of the report would not accept that at all. But look, thank you indeed for talking to us, Nick Foster, journalist and author of A Murder at Roaring Water. Let's bring in Frank Buttimer, Ian Bailey's solicitor. Frank, I imagine you'd like to respond to some of that.
Yeah, that's an absolute load of nonsense by a self-serving, self-promoting author.
Okay, let's just deal with the case rather than let's play the ball, not the man here, if that's okay.
Well, yeah, but the man and the ball are very much associated. But Mr. Foster, whom I don't know, promotes the idea that there was some evidence for which the DPP should have considered a prosecution and that a prosecution should have been mounted. That's just simply nonsense. But what actually happened here is that the DPP diligently considered the so-called evidence on more than one occasion and clearly not only debunked the evidence, but pointed out quite clearly also that the manner in which the so-called evidence was generated was highly questionable. And the DPP, the responsible authority for prosecution in this state, stated in the report that there was no basis upon which a thoroughly flawed and prejudiced investigation could lead to a prosecution. Mr. Foster or anybody else who promotes the idea that Mr. Bailey has a case to answer is going against evidence, going against our state system, and going against the available information, which clearly indicates that there was something substantially problematic about the manner in which Mr. Bailey was investigated, and literally wipes the floor with the idea that there was any evidence sufficient to mount a prosecution.
You kept in contact with Ian Bailey in recent years?
I did, Shane. I actually had contact with him since Christmas, and I had text communication with him about 5-6 days ago. All very, very unfortunate, I have to say. He died a lonely and sad individual whose life was destroyed as a result of what was done to him by the Irish state.
There will be a Garda, there is a Garda cold case review of the investigation ongoing. Do you expect anything to come out of that, Frank?
You'd always live in hope. Unfortunately, that hope died with Ian, insofar as he always had hoped that there would be some identification of the suspect and a successful prosecution. There's always a possibility, modern science, etc., but really in the absence of people, coming forward with meaningful information, I'd say as the years go by, Shane, the chances of securing the identification of a suspect and a successful prosecution are receding.
Do you think it's unlikely at this stage we will ever get to the bottom of this awful murder?
Yeah, it's just the whole thing's just so dreadful. Really, really, truly, the chances are receding. There's always a hope, I suppose, possibility, but we shall see.
Frank Buttimer, solicitor for Ian Bailey, thank you for talking to Newstalk Breakfast this morning.